Hello again, my lovelies. Pirate Scum Gaming here, and tonight I'm bringing you something a little bit different. Tonight I am going to be talking about my DEWSci control build, and for that I am using the T6 Fleet Scryer. The T6 Fleet Scryer came out when the Delta expansion hit, and at the time it wasn't a very good science ship. But now that they've reworked the intel abilities, this ship does actually very well for itself, as you'll see in the ISE coming up. So let's go ahead and dive right into this and take a look at the build. First off, for a look at the forward weapons, we have the Phaser Wide Angle Dual Heavy Beam Bank from your Discovery reputation. And I'm using this for the two-piece, which we'll go over here in just a little bit. This is a very heavy hitting beam, even with surgical strikes. That's why I have it firing first. Second up is the Terran Task Force Phaser Dual Heavy Cannons. This also hits very hard under surgical strikes. It is one of the top performing energy weapons for that particular build type. This comes from your Terran reputation. And the reason we're using this is it's 200% damage to targets at 25% hull, or as we like to call it, the 200% execute ability. Next up is something a little bit different, the Gravimetric Photon Torpedo. This comes from the Dyson reputation, and the reason you're using this one because it feeds off of EPG and control. When it fires, it's the target and creates little gravimetric rifts, and they do a lot of damage, especially under spread. Now, under high yield, yeah, it gets to be a little bit of a problem, because if you're too close when this goes off, you will kill yourself. So that's why this particular torpedo is best under spread. Space Corps changed a little bit, still using the Elite Fleet Intervention Protomatter Deflector from the Fleet Colony. However, I purchased another one, that way I can have two, one for DPS, one for EPG, and as you can see, this one's rolled for EPG. We have a crafted deteriorating secondary deflector, modded for EPG and Control X. And the reason we are using the deteriorating one is because of its damage proc. To affected targets deals 7200 radiation damage, 50% shield pen every second for 9 seconds. That's quite a bit of radiation damage overall. Competitive engine, you know why I use this. Warp Core and Shield's a little bit different. We're using the Revolutionary Warp Core from the Imperial Rift set. The Warp Core gives control expertise as well as weapon amplification, which is important for surgical strikes. Let's go take a look at the two-piece. A House Mokai Science. Plus 23.8 all damage resistance rating versus foes in 490-degree arc. Damage resistance is helpful for this particular ship because, as we all know, science ships are notoriously squishy. 15% flight turn rate. That's also good for this particular ship, and I'll be discussing why here in a little bit. As well as just about 56% exotic damage crit severity. That is a hell of a lot. And it scales with Starship weapon amplification. So yeah, it does double duty here. That is why we're using it. Aft weapons. I'm using the Trilithium Enhanced Omnidirectional Phaser Beam for its chance at weapon haste. You get a chance for 10% firing cycle haste. Next up is Advanced Inhibiting Phaser Heavy Turret from your Gamma reputation. I'm using this one because number one, it's a phaser turret. Number two, it has a chance of knocking engines offline. And last but not least, the Omnidirectional Agni Phaser. This does put a bit of a dot on the target and has a chance for disable, which is helpful for keeping those pesky NPCs from trying to run away from your anomalies. Next is the energy amplifier, which helps buff directed energy weapon damage. Deuterium surplus to help get around. I've talked about this before. And for this particular ship, this is extremely useful. Again, I'll be talking about that here momentarily. Kobayashi Maru for the random buffs. And exotic particle flood from your science R&D, 20% bonus exotic damage. Universal console slot is the Lorcator. You hear me talk about this thing a million times. I run it on all my builds. Crit chance, weapon power setting, and that massive Starship shield pen. Next up is the Genesis Seed. This comes off of the Clark multi-mission. This is my #1 damage source for this particular build. This is my max one hit. This thing does an incredible amount of damage. It gives you quite a bit of radiation damage, as well as buffs your drain expertise. It forms a little planetoid at the target you select, and it does a hell of a lot of damage. Next up is the Tholian Web Spinner. I use this on a lot of my builds as well. You've seen this in action. Creates little Tholian webs that do a lot of damage. Bioneural infusion circuits. This comes from the Lobi store. This is one of the oldest Lobi consoles in the game. Starship hull capacity, which is nice. Starship control expertise, which is essential for this build, as well as a good bit of crit severity, which is also good for this build. Emblazing Phaser Lance. You've heard me talk about this a million times. This helps with universal designs, and this just raffle stomps anything it hits. Exotic particle field exciter. This is very expensive. This was crafted for me by a friend. This helps buff my exotic particle generator skill. A little bit with shields, but you know how I feel about shields. And some weapon power setting. Cutting tractor beam. This creates a little Borg generator that shoots out a cutting beam, hits the target, and it's passive here. Or it's active, rather, I'm sorry. Activating a universal console adds 10% bonus damage to universal consoles for 25 seconds. Also gives some Starship hull pennant restoration, which is nice. Keeps you alive. As well as Starship energized hull plating. Damage resistance. Again, this is a giant ship. It's notoriously squishy, so every little bit helps. Delvic Terror Generator. This is from the cross-faction salvage box from the Infinity box, where you can buy it on the exchange. 20% bonus exotic damage, 5% crit severity. The passives are quite nice, especially for this build. Neutronic Eddy Generator. This comes from the Ryzian Weather Control Ship. This creates a giant purple space bouncy house, we're going to call it. This tosses stuff around, does a lot of damage. It just causes chaos. I love this console. It's so much fun for a science ship. And tactical consoles, last but not least, phaser vulnerability exploiters to buff that crit severity. Let's look at skills. But you know what? Before we look at skills, let's go ahead and take a look at that Disco 2-piece. I promised I'd show you that. Okay, War Discretion. Here we go. On crit, plus 1% crit severity buff for 20 seconds, stacks up 25 times. That's what we're using it for, to get that 25% crit severity. Because, as you all know at Surgical Strikes, crit severity is king. Alright, now we're going to take a look at those skills. Alright, these are the same skills Augmented Dictator Games uses. Augie gave me this one to use. This is very good for all kinds of builds. Feel free now to pause the video, take a screenshot if you are interested in using this. Moving on to Specializations. Intel Primary for the flanking bonus, Temporal Operative for the cooldowns, and Entropic Rider. Okay, traits. This is where things get a little bit different. And I can hear you guys already. Right now, you're running a science build. Why don't you have Particle Manipulator? There is a good answer to that question. The answer is because I'm lazy. I have neglected that particular R&D school on this toon. I'm working on it right now. I have it to a little bit over level 11. And as soon as I can get it to level 15, I will be doing an update on this build featuring that particular personal space trait to show you the difference. But as always, I always find a workaround. Alright, starting with adaptive offense. Crit chance becomes crit severity. I've talked about this a million times. Same thing with good day to die. Turns go down fighting into a reusable buff. If you're a tactical captain and you're not using this, why not? I mean, what are you waiting for? Get off your butt, go to the nearest exchange console, and get yourself a copy. Because if you're not using it, you're doing yourself a huge disadvantage. Fragment of AI Tech. Plus 30% energy weapon damage based on control expertise. Unconventional systems. We all know why we use this. For cooldown reduction for consoles. This is another one of those. If you're not using it, you know what's wrong with you. Stop what you're doing. Go get it. I mean, I've talked about this on many of my past videos. This is an essential on all my builds. Now, this is what I'm using in place of the Particle Manipulator personal space trait. Enlightened. This come off the exchange from the DS9 lockbox. Plus exotic damage and a little bit of hull regen. No, it's not exactly the same thing. But, you know, this is a good workaround. It did me pretty well in the run. Superior beam training, not much to talk about here. Same thing with fleet coordinator. Everyone gets this. Everyone gets this. Bonus all damage per team member. Up to 10% for a team of 5. That's why you'll see I'm always running a team of 5 on my ISEs. Terran targeting systems. Crit severity. Intelligent agent Taché. This helps for captain ability cooldowns. Everyone should be running this. And last but certainly not least, we have the Boimler effect. This is our primary cooldown reduction ability. Yes, this does have a penchant for misfiring at times, but I have a duty officer that helps correct this, and I'll discuss that momentarily. Starship traits, we have emergency weapon cycle from the Kurak, Morgu, or Arbiter. This is for weapon haste. Universal designs from the crossfield refit. When activating a universal console, crit severity and crit chance. I run this on all my builds. The ruin of our enemies, also known as the ruin of our wallets. This is a stupid expensive trait on a stupid expensive ship. It's locked behind a promo box. It's, like I said, stupid expensive, but it's very powerful. And the only reason I have this is this was gifted to me some time ago. Vanguard Specialist. This comes from the legendary bug ship. No, I am not going to try to go over its whole full name. It's way too long. So, for all intents and purposes, it's the legendary Jem'Hadar bug ship. Specialist Bridge Officer abilities that apply weapon modifications have their recharge times reduced by 33% and their durations extended by 5%. That includes Surgical Strikes, which is the main event of this build. Terran Machinations. This comes off of the legendary Glenn, I believe. I could be wrong. You may want to double check me on the Stowe Wiki, folks. My memory is just not what it used to be. When activating attack pattern bridge officer abilities, plus 30% exotic damage for 15 seconds. When activating a control bridge officer ability, 10% firing cycle haste for energy weapons for 15 seconds. That is why we are using it. And last but not least, Spore-infused anomalies from the Somerville. This helps buff your anomalies. To foes within 5 kilometers of your anomalies, good amount of electrical damage, as well as nerfing their power levels. By nerfing their power levels, they can't do squat to attack you. Alright, for personal space reputation. Magnified firepower from your gamma reputation. Pretty self-explanatory. Same with advanced targeting systems from your Dyson reputation. Controlled countermeasures. This is from your temporal reputation. Particle generator amplifier. This is from the Iconian rep. Bonus exotic damage. And last but not least, precision, 5% crit hit chance. Now, you could either use this or you could use Tyler's. I recommend using whichever one gives you the higher amount of crit hit chance. This time, precision won out. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at my bridge officer stations. Universal Science. I'm using Tachyon B1 to proc the secondary deflector. Torque spread 1. Kind of self-explanatory there. Attack pattern beta 1 to help proc Terran machinations. Emergency power to aux. This buffs my auxiliary power settings as well as buffs my exotic particle generator skill. I have a DOFF that helps buff this. Emergency power to weapons to proc emergency weapon cycle. Eject warp plasma to proc unconventional systems. I did test this with Let It Go, but I was having a problem getting my cooldowns to work right, so I switched back to this, and I did not have that much of a problem. Alright, Commander Science Intel, mostly for cooldowns, but also for surgical strikes. We have Viral Impulse Burst, Electromagnetic Pulse Probe, as well as Ionic Turbulence. These are uncon procs. And Surgical Strikes, the main event. Lieutenant Commander Science, we have Very Cold in Space for debuff, Destabilizing Resonance Beam for secondary deflector proc, and Gravity Well 1 for the control aspect. Let's go ahead and look at duty officers. Alright, first up we have 2447. This helps buff my power levels. And let's talk about that for a moment. Now, as you can see, my power levels are set up a little bit different this time. I have most everything into weapons and auxiliary. As we all know, for auxiliary power, auxiliary must be set high in order to buff your science abilities. That means shields I never have a lot of power in to begin with, but that means I had to sacrifice some of my engine power to buff my auxiliary power. Now, my engine power being so low, I'm going to have some problem getting around, or so you would think. And that's where deuterium surplus comes in, evasive maneuvers, as well as the one trait that helps buff this. So, not to mention this particular duty officer that helps buff power levels. When this goes off, and it goes off quite a lot, it maxes all my power levels, so I have all that extra power in the engines, which helps me get around. Next up, projectile weapon officer, chance for stacking crit severity. We all know what crit severity means for surgical strikes. That's what it feeds off of. 22 of 47. This particular bridge officer, or DOFF rather, on use of engineering abilities, 15% chance to improve crit severity by 20% for 30 seconds. And on use of intel abilities, 30% chance to improve weapon armor pen. Two good things in one package. I gotta love that. Alright, next up we have Frogger here, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. Is a very rare technician, which increase exotic damage when using emergency powered auxiliary. So that is why we're using emergency powered auxiliary. Not only does it buff the EPG and auxiliary power levels, this BOFF really turns up the volume, or DOF rather. Next up, 42 of 47. Now this guy, on use of tactical abilities, 15% chance to reduce Intel Bridge Officer ability cooldowns by 50%, and vice versa for Intel, 30% chance to reduce Tactical Bridge Officer ability cooldowns by 50%. Now in case Boimler starts slacking off, this guy's going to stand behind him and crack him in the back of the head, tell him to wake up and pay attention. So that's why we're using this. And last but not least, we have a gravimetric scientist, chance to create an aftershock gravity well. That's always handy, right? Alright, let's take a look at this ship. This is a very cool looking ship. It's kind of different than anything that's really any other ship. I do happen to kind of like this, honestly. The more I've flown it, the more the ship's kind of growing on me. I did change out the nacelles since I do have the Eclipse, because I think this gives it a more sleek and narrow profile. See, the Scryer ones have this big old hood on them that just kind of takes away from the lines. The Eclipse warp nacelle really helps with that. It just gives it such a smooth, just beautiful appearance. I love this ship. Alright, so ISE is coming up next, so sit back, relax, enjoy the show. And I'll catch you on the flip side with the Parse Explanation. And we're back from the ISE. That was a great run, albeit a little long. So let's go take a look at this. I am, of course, at James Bryce, and I did 487.14K. That is not bad for a first outing of my controlled DEWSci build. I'm pleased with that. It far exceeded the expectations I had for it. Also, along with this run, we have at Mikey213, also known as Mad Dog Mikey, another content creator and streamer. Go check him out on YouTube. Make sure you ring the bell and smash that subscribe button like it owes you money. Mikey here was doing a newly leveled toon. Nothing fancy, no fleet gear, no nothing. Pulled just about 69K. In ISE, be watching for a video he's doing on this particular ship and run. Give it a watch and tell him Pirate Scum Gaming sent you. Also along for fun, we had at Talon, who's running DPS. Great job, Talon. Doing good, doing good. Also, we have at Lord Ice, who is the tank for the run. Very good job, my friend. I'm going to round up here, 92% total damage in, and 87% total attacks in. Lord Ice is one of my tanking students, and he is just absolutely nailing it as a tank. Great job, buddy. I'm very proud of you. Keep up the good work. Also DPSing in this run was Yeg 261. Great job. I am very proud of you. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at mine. Okay, so we had a max one hit of 1,256,000. That is outstanding. And it's showing pets. So let's show you guys what did this. Genesis Seed. Did I lie? No, I did not. This Genesis Seed just absolutely waffle stomped something. This hit like a runaway semi on top of a runaway freight train. This did just unbelievable damage. Just like I said it did. Okay, and here we go. We have the Terran Task Force dual heavy phaser cannons. Of course, they did the most of my energy weapons. Like I said, these things hit extremely well under surgical strikes. Second biggest hit was my immolating phaser lance. This did very good for itself. Of course, we have the phaser wide angle dual heavy beambank. This topped in at about 267. Chain web projection. That clocked in at 226. That was very good. Phaser beam array, surgical strikes. This was the trilithium, I believe. Nope, trilithium's right here under surgical strikes. So phaser beam array. Not sure where that one come from. Oh, you know, this is the Agni phaser, I believe. Inhibiting phaser turret. Not as big a hit as I would like it to have been, but it is what it is. Secondary deflector. Not bad considering this is an experimental build and not built around the secondary deflector. Gravimetric torpedo spread. That did very good here. Delphic Dare did all right. Nothing to write home about. Gravimetric Rift. Miniature gravimetric rift. This is from the gravimetric torpedo. It did all right for itself. Nothing real special here. Genesis Seed, again here, it hit again right here really pretty good. So overall, yeah, this is a very effective build. And like I said at the beginning of the video, once I have Particle Manipulator unlocked and I hit level 15 of my Science R&D school, I will rerun an ISE, parse it, and post the updated video so that you guys can see the difference. So overall, I would have to say that the T6 Fleet Scryer, even though it is an older ship and not exactly what you would call a meta ship, it still can hang in an ISE very well. I am very pleased with this overall, and I will definitely be honing and fine-tuning this build as time goes on. So expect to see maybe a few more vids with this particular ship. But until then, like we always say around here, don't go by the book, think like a pirate, and remember to do all the usual YouTube things. Ring the bell, hit the like button, make sure you smash that subscribe button like it owes you money. You know the drill. I hate talking about it, but you know, it helps the channel and it helps YouTube know I exist. So until then, I'll catch you next time.
Human! Play, Damjat! Human!